We all have our favorite incantations in Elden Ring, and Shadow of the Erdtree dropped 28 more to choose from. I want to put them to the test one boss at a time, but there's a catch. If I beat a boss, or even a regular enemy, I have to discard the incantation used, never to be seen again. So can I beat Shadow of the Erdtree using only DLC incantations, but only once? I am starting off in the Shadowlands at level 1, so I can't actually cast anything even if I wanted to. The most important resource I need right now are runes. So I searched around for any Scadu fragments while making my way to the Fort of Reprimand. Inside this room next to an Omen Killer, we can find a Marika's rune. This single item gives us enough runes to get all the way up to level 34. Naturally, I put all that into faith because I'm overconfident, and that will change very quickly. Now that we've secured a few levels, I still needed some incantations and a seal to cast them with. I made a pit stop at Ballarat for more Scadu and to speak with Ansbach. His questline nets us an incant later that I'd prefer not to miss. Then to Bonnie Village to break Mikla's rune, which triggers NPC questline progression, and you can't avoid it if you're going to the Shadowkeep anyway. Once inside, there are a few Shadow runes here, which means more levels, and our first 2 incants. Fire Serpent, which is found on this ledge. Oh, okay, Fire Serpent. And Wrath from Afar, located up in the rafters. Okay, is this it? Ah, nice. If we drain the water from the church district, we can encounter Elder Wego, the necromancer. This is a lonely old man who had a falling out with his friend and disciple, Salsa, due to ideological differences, and now is said to be raising these corpses to be his friends. And that's very relatable. Anyways, Wego around him to find the first and best of the 3 DLC options, the Fire Knight Seal. Salsa, on the other hand, experiencing his first social interaction in well over a century, decided, nah, you know what, this is too much. Alright, later dude. And thought the afterlife was a more preferable option. This decision would net us the Rain of Fire incantation in exchange for Wrath from Afar. And while we're in this area, might as well grab the Shadow Avatar Grace and a second Marika's rune, which gets us all the way up to level 50. With our shiny new levels and a solid start on incantations, it was time to focus on our next big hurdle, Commander Gaius. But this guy's no joke, and if I wanted to stand a chance, I'd need the right tools. This meant tracking down 2 key items, multi-layered Rings of Light and the Dryleaf Seal. Multi-layered can be found after solving some minor issues in Stone Coffin Fissure. Hey, what's this guy doing? Hey, get him off me. Someone get your boy. Is he gonna fall? Oh. Okay. Thanks for the assist, buddy. And the Dryleaf Seal is an interesting item. It's the best mid-level seal in the game, but requires you to beat Mohg and Radahn to enter the DLC. But just beating Mohg alone gives you way more levels than you would need to get to the point where this seal is no longer the best option, so it's kind of in a weird spot. But in my very niche scenario where I entered the Shadowlands at level 1, this is like mathematically the best seal I can have right now. It does also give a nice 15% damage buff to Ring of Light incantations, which are all phenomenal. So holding this seal in your offhand does retain some value, even at later levels. Once we enter the Gaius fight, you may notice that I'm rocking base HP. This is because I was going to do this run only leveling Faith, but given the viability of these DLC incantations, I will soon have to admit to myself, this is not that run, and I'm just not that guy. I made it work here because multi-layered Rings of Light is borderline OP, made even stronger due to Gaius' holy weakness. At only level 50, this is doing 2k damage on a normal cast, and about 3k when charged. But about halfway through the fight, I got bored, because Gaius is just so easy for me. Whenever he jumps in the air, this is roughly 3 seconds I could be using to scroll through TikTok, which is at least 10 videos. So as a time save, I began trying to hit him while he's in midair. Not only is this possible... Oh, you can hit him while he's doing that. Huh. Okay. But multi-layered rings does some stance damage, which theoretically means you can stance break him in midair. Yeah. Oh, what? Wait, you can do that? Bro, he must be fuming right now. I don't even think he knew I could do that. What? Oh, that's so interesting. Now that's almost purely RNG, because multi-layered stance damage is persistent, which means it's almost impossible to track, and Gaius can just walk away. But it was cool here, and who knows, maybe this can be useful in some other context. After taking down Gaius, we can discard multi-layered rings and grab our prize. Dude, it always feels so good beating Gaius because you get like a mega power-up. It's so nice. Because Shadowkeep grants us access to most of the map, I ran into Ancient Runes to grab some more Shadow Fragments and 3 new incantations. Aspect of the Crucible Bloom, Pest Thread Spears, and Divine Bird Feathers. This is the worst incant in the game, and that's not my opinion, it's a public service announcement. After that I took a trip to Raw Base for 2 more easy-to-get DLC incants. Knight's Lightning Spear from the Scorpion River Catacombs, and Electro Charge from Fog Rift. Electrocharge appears to be the progenitor of the other lightning buffing incants, like Vike's Lightning and Dragon Bolt of Floor Sacks, which gives us a nice lore explanation for why they're all trash. Wait. Did that say 19 damage? That 19? Is that bugged? What the heck? I didn't find out until later when I was using this in the Leda V Ansbach fight, but the initial cast of Electrocharge can do some decent damage. However, it's still going to be outclassed by most other incants. If this was to get a buff, which don't hold your breath, I'd love to see the Lightning Pulse get like 1 stance damage, or any value above 0. A player buff that stops enemy poise regeneration would be super sick and I think make this actually viable. Either way, this fight showcases the only other positive of this incant, which is keeping aggro away from your co-op partner, or in this case, Ansbach. And we were able to take down Leda, letting us continue Ansbach's questline. Dude, that fight was like actually kind of close. That was a little bit scary. I don't know if that fight's required for Ansbach's incant, but I really don't want to miss it, so better safe than sorry. I didn't have a clear idea of where to go next, but I was still pretty under-leveled, so I set my sights on 2 relatively easy bosses. Romina is weak to fire damage, so I went over to the Church of the Bud to test out Fire Serpent. And this is your classic pair blue jeans type spell. It's not flashy, it's not going to draw the eye, but it just works with everything. You can slot it into like any faith build, and it's a very consistent DPS option. It feels similar to Flamesling, except with a delayed cast, better tracking, and slightly less damage. The delayed cast makes it pretty good against bosses that have a tendency to dodge a lot, but overall it's a nice addition to the fire spell arsenal. This fight nets us another new incant, Rotten Butterflies, and I use the runes from Romina to level from 65 to 77, putting all of my remaining points into HP. Then to Ballarat to challenge the Lion. If you've done one of these runs before, you'll know that before every boss, you look at the remaining spells, incants, whatever, and ask the question, what is the worst thing I can get away with using here? My answer to that was Crucible Bloom. Most people claim this incantation is not very good. To that, I would say 2 things. 1, soft hands, brother. Back in my day, we had to use Divine Pillars of Light, and that shit sucked. And 2, I'm not sure I can convince you it's good, but it's better than you might think. It has an incredibly long cast range, rivaling even that of Frenzied Burst, and can be further boosted by the Arrow's Reach talisman. Second, you can cheese fools by abusing line of sight. Most incants, even ones that don't originate from the player, don't work if you can't see your target. And third, the damage is not that bad. Wearing the Crucible Axe or Tree set boosts the damage by an absurd 17%. If I got a charge cast off, we're talking more than 3,000 smackers. Unfortunately, that's where the positives end. It's only really viable against large and or slow bosses, it has no tracking, unlike Devonia's version, and the long cast time limits your punish windows. Luckily, Lion just kind of misses attacks a lot. What? How did that miss? What? After a few more casts, the Lion ends its dance, and we can discard Aspect of the Crucible Bloom. Then pick up the Dismembered Head, which we'll use to go trick an old, blind grandma into giving us her family heirloom incantation, Watchful Spirit. But the joke's on me, because the only thing this watches is us getting our ass kicked. What is it? What is this tracking on this? What? Not a single one hit that guy? Huh? And here's where I have a bone to pick with some of these DLC incantations. It's not news that many of them are underwhelming, but what doesn't make sense to me is that we have better versions of them already in the game. Grandam's Spirit fires quicker, does more damage, and actually has a tracking function. Devonia's version of Bloom follows the player, albeit slowly, and don't even get me started on Divine Bird Feathers. I had a whole spiel on this one alone, but all you need to know is that it consumes FP as fast as Comet Azure does, to do less damage than Fire Surge, and for some reason, it devours your stamina bar, so that you can't even dodge the boss once you finish doing nothing. A damn chicken gets a better version of this than we do. That's not to say there aren't some banger incants in the DLC, but these are not them. So anyways, I head over to Ancient Dragon Man with Watchful Spirit equipped, and very slowly walk up and down, making sure not to deviate even an inch, and eventually that worked. This needs a buff. This is so bad right now. What the heck? Once we reach the Grand Altar, we have a choice to make. We can either give Floor Sacks TLA's Concoction and receive Dragon Bolt of Floor Sacks, or we can forego the Concoction and get the Priestess Heart. As I mentioned earlier, I think Bolt of Floor Sacks is pretty bad, doubly so in this run, so we're going Priestess Heart. Then head up the mountain towards Bayle. For this fight, I'm busting Outpass Thread Spears, which has my vote for the best incant in the DLC, and I think top 3 maybe top 3 in the entire game. It's especially good on bosses with a large amount of thickness and or girth, of which Bayle has both in spades. Even without buffs, this thing is hitting for 5 to 7k per cast. Insane DPS, quick cast time, good range, some of the best tracking in the game, and its stance damage is surprisingly high. Oh, and you can charge it to make all those things even better. In this fight specifically, Bayle basically didn't even get a phase 2 because this happened when he did his charge up explosion move. Wait, he's just dead, no? He's dead, right? Oh my god, 14k? Holy shit, dude. Pretty good. The only time I've had an easier Bayle fight was when Telu clapped his cheeks for me 2 videos ago. After discarding Pest Thread Spears, we can return to the altar to grab the Priestess Heart from Florisax's disappeared corpse, and we can exchange Bayle's Heart for one of 2 options, Bayle's Flame Lightning or Bayle's Tyranny. I think Flame Lightning is a slightly worse version of Dragon Ball from the base game, so I picked Tyranny, but you do you. There's also a talisman in the Elder's Hovel that directly boosts the damage of Bayle's Tyranny by 15%. Talisman of Dread? That's gotta be the coolest talisman named in the game, right? With Bayle out of the picture, it was time to head to the Shadow Keep to take on MessMUH. My ticket to this fight is Knight's Lightning Spear, which is why I wanted to get the Priestess Heart relatively early. This item is similar to the Dragon Stones of previous games, with this version turning into a pretty Dragon Princess and buffing all Dragon Cult incantations by 20%. And it's a unique buff, so it stacks with Golden Vow and whatever else. Pretty powerful. Combine that with an unupgraded Gobblestone Seal in your offhand, and we're doing some pretty big damage. Oh, hang on, we can do it like an Imagine Dragons cosplay. Okay, ready? I've got the lightning, and he's the MessMUH. Okay, that was stupid. That was dumb. Yeah, I'm a white guy who likes Imagine Dragons, okay? Do something about it. This is also the first time I experienced the flashbang effect of some of these DLC Incants. Knight's Lightning Spear and multi-layered rings seem to be the chief offenders. But basically, the particle effects can sometimes make it hard to see what the boss is doing, especially in dark rooms like this one. We're going to briefly return to this fight later for quest reasons, but Knight's Lightning Spear was a godsend for someone who normally struggles in this fight, and I think it's easily top 3 from the DLC. When defeated, we can discard Knight's Lightning Spear and trade MessMUH's Remembrance for MessMUH's Orb, henceforth known as Morb. With Morb in my hands and an idea in my head, I race over to the Sunflower Bonfire to see if this incant was as strong as I thought it was going to be. Oh my god. One-shot him, okay. It is, but with some heavy asterisks. First, the positives. Insane DPS. It does fire damage, which is highly coveted, and its stance breaks fools like my Italian grandfather breaks kneecaps, efficiently and often. But there's a pretty big drawback, the lack of hyper armor during casting. You can channel 99% of this thing, get lightly tapped at the last millisecond, and now your controller's across the room. One other frustration is that despite lifting your character nearly twice the height of a jump, I found it very inconsistent to dodge attacks that I could easily dodge while jumping. My guess is that while a jump gives you effectively iframes to the lower part of your body, Morb probably doesn't, which means unless you can completely clear an attack with the height Morb provides, you're gonna get smacked. If that's the way this works, I understand it, but that doesn't make it any less frustrating to use as a player. What if you just sprinkled in some hyper armor in there for us? It'll make us happy. Don't you want us to be happy, Miyazaki? Anyways, I got fed up using this against Sunflower, so I took Morb over to Ancient Ruins to fight the Great Red Bear in exchange for Roar of Regalia. I don't know, I want to like this incant, but that hyper armor thing just really makes it not very good. Oh well. Then I went back to the Shadowkeep's secret room to grab the Domain of Dragons NFT, which we'll end up selling to this dude for a rock. Which, yeah, I guess that's about what they're worth nowadays. Rockheart is the Dragon Communion variant of the Priestess Heart and buffs incants like the Breath Spells and Bayle's Tyranny, which is the incant I'll be using to beat Sunflower. In its current state, Tyranny is kind of what Morb wishes it was. It does seem to grant some level of hyper armor, it's lightning and fire damage, which means you can buff it in a near infinite amount of ways, and it just does more damage. The arcane requirement is a little high at 49, but even that is less than the 60 faith requirement of Morb. Also, something funny I noticed, if you do get knocked out of the cast animation, the lava pool will still spawn and still do damage without costing you any FP. So technically, I guess this is the most efficient FP cost per damage dealt in the entire game. But yeah, obviously no one's going to build around that. We take down Sunflower with a few more cast of Tyranny and our reward with Remembrance of the Shadow Flower, which we can exchange for Land of Shadow back at the round table. Thanks to some item descriptions and creators like Zully the Witch, we know that Divine Beast is actually just two dudes in a lion cosplay who are performing a traditional dance that empowers them to protect what is likely their historical and cultural capital. Which kind of begs the question, what are these dudes doing? Are we supposed to assume this area is an important Hornsent archaeological site? Or is this just two homies having a good time? Land of Shadow is one of the few incants in the DLC that is nearly identical to its boss's counterpart. It's still not that great of a spell, but the projectile move the Sunflower used is pretty much what you get here. Yeah, you know what, I'll give it some bonus points for making me feel like Gilgamesh from Fate's Day, or whatever. Once this lion falls, we are rewarded with Divine Beast Tornado, and we can go back and discard Land of Shadow. The next few spells we'll be using are the Spiral Tower Incantations. We currently have Divine Feathers and Divine Tornado, and we've already used Watchful Spirit. Golden Arcs is found in the passageway to Bonnie Village, and Giant Golden Arc typically requires you to beat a Furnace Golem in the Ruins of Unte, but there is a skip you can do kind of around the backside of the structure using Torrent. Okay, so like right here you jump twice right? 1, 2, and what? Oh, okay, we got it. And Giant Golden Arcs. Dude, this is so good. Like, without that skip, you can't get this at all, because you have to do the Furnace Golem thing. This is so good. The final one, Spira, can be found in a near limb in front of this priest after burning the sealing tree. The seal that buffs some of these incants is the Spiral Tree Seal. In order to get this, you will have to have had... You will have needed to burn the tree and solve the Sacred Tower puzzle. This seal also has one of my favorite descriptions in all of Elden Ring. Sacred Seal of Soiled Amber engraved with a spiral tree design. The majesty of the White Tower, stretching to reach the gods, even inspired a secret faith in the invaders, the people of the Erdtree. Oh wow, so like the soldiers, the Fire Knights and stuff that were fighting Hornsent people saw the majesty of the tower and the uniqueness of the Hornsent culture, and they were like, nah, you know what? That shit kind of rips. That's a little bit fire, actually. And you know what? They're right. Okay, so this buffs the damage of, like, the tornado spell, right? The storm thing. With Divine Tornado in hand, I went back to test it on the Golden Hippo, and it's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Not only is it cool, you're throwing a tornado at someone, but the damage is pretty good. If the boss is unusually large, or in this case, long, the spell can hit up to 3 times. If you do a charge cast followed by a normal cast, we're looking at 5-digit damage numbers. And the stance damage is higher than I expected. I only have 2 nitpicks. The spell can be buffed by wearing the Divine Beast Talisman and this nasty-ass head, but it's not buffed by the Spiral Tree Seal despite being categorized as a Spiral Tower incantation. Which kinda stinks, because 20% more damage on top of this would be pretty heckin' sweet. Now before you loreheads start typing away, I know Divine Tornado isn't technically an incant, but the Tempest being loaded as one. Cool, but then why are these 3 buffed, despite being called sorceries, not incants? And there's another issue. We've all been a victim of this guy handing out free trips to space. Whoa, what? He can do that? Bro, I just got like Kirby up bead. What the fuck? Dancing Lion can do this as well, albeit to a lesser extent. But when I was using it, the tornado was very inconsistent in which enemies got launched and when. Oh, so it doesn't launch her, what? For example, it worked sometimes on Millennia. Oh, what? But when I tested it on the Gank fight before coming to Hippo, Hornsent ate every cast. And maybe Hornsent has some rocks in his pockets, keeping him weighed down, if indeed he even has pockets in that mess of a rope. I don't know. But yeah, those 2 problems nerf both the seal and spell for like no reason, so kind of annoying. When the Hippo falls, it drops some shadow fragments and a new incant, Aspect of the Crucible Thorns. This would eventually be used to take down the second Great Red Bear, Ravla, in exchange for a helmet that boosts the damage of Roar of Regalia by 15%. Then discard Crucible Thorns. I like to try to beat as many bosses as I can in these runs, so I went to the Ruins of Metyr to fight Metyr. The first incant I tried was Rain of Fire, which is pretty darn good after the buffs. It used to rain, I don't know, pasta sauce or something, but now it's real fire and it does real damage. The incant I eventually beat Metyr with, though, was Giant Golden Arc, and everything about this incantation says B tier. Damage, range, stance damage, it's all good, but nothing really stands out. Except for its ability to clear mobs. For that, it's S tier because it pierces enemies infinitely. Oh, spawn killed. Whoops. I think the slow travel speed is also low-key an advantage. I imagine this is good against NPC invaders and role-catching people if you're into PvP. When Metyr falls, we can discard Giant Golden Arc, and now we have to come up with a plan for the Gank fight. This fight is plagued with all of the same problems it usually is in these runs. Multiple enemies, long spawn-in timers, having to use 2 or more incants in one fight, whatever. The Gank fight is always a headache. My first thought was to use rotten butterflies. Maybe there's a world where I apply rot to all of them, and they all die at the same time, but for whatever reason, literally all of Leda's allies are immune to rot except for Dane. So right back to the drawing board. I mentioned we'd return to the MessMUH fight earlier, and that's because this fight is part of Hornsent's questline. If you summon him here, Hornsent won't appear in the Gank fight, making it way easier. Obviously though, Hornsent does damage, which breaks our rules. It's not impossible for MessMUH to kill Hornsent before he does any damage, but it's very unlikely. Thankfully, there is a way around this. You know in school when you're doing a class project and there's always that one guy who does absolutely nothing, swoops in at the last second, and takes credit? Yeah, we want Hornsent to do that. If you get MessMUH low, like 1 cast away from dead, then summon Hornsent, then quickly finish off MessMUH, Hornsent will swoop in, take credit, and now he won't appear in a nearer limb. Oh hey Hornsent, how you feeling about everything? Yeah, same. You don't even have to worry about his invasion at the church. Regardless of whether you kill him or he invades, he still won't appear. This should be very useful in future runs. So that solves one issue, but we still have the problem of eliminating 2 enemies with 1 incant. But I have a plan for that. I imagine, being surrounded by a majority of male companions, Leda has almost certainly been a victim of mansplaining. But today, we'll unveil the newest advancement in misogyny technology. Man's-yelling. Oh my god, it's so effective. What the hell? 50% less subtle and 40% more abusive, this technique will stunlock anything with ears for as long as you can keep your mouth open. Bonus points if you're wearing the head of a species you recently hunted to extinction. Roar of Rugelia kind of trivializes this fight and does what I was hoping Divine Tornado was going to do. When charged, Rugelia's Roar will knock down NPC invaders not once, but twice in a single cast. This means if you have sufficient stamina and FP, you can stunlock them indefinitely. The only problem now is beating both at the same time. But thanks to the impressive damage Roar does, and the fact that Dane and Leda share very similar HP pools, even that wasn't that big of a deal. Once we level up and discard Roar of Rugelia, we can prepare for Radahn. Normally I would fight him much later, but Radahn is locking us out of 2 different incantations. If you've done Ansbach's quest up until this point, you will receive the Furious Blade of Ansbach after the fight, along with the Light of Miquella. And given our current arsenal, those would be very useful. But the problem is, it's Consort Radahn. So I walked in with Golden Arcs as my primary DPS and Rotten Butterflies for the status effect. But my expectations were low, I hadn't heard a lot of positive things about this incant. After this fight, however, I now believe Rotten Butterflies is not only deserving of its legendary status, but I actually think it's one of the best incants in the entire game. Let me explain. At first glance, Rotten Butterflies has all the qualities of a subpar incantation. A long cast time that requires you to be stationary, it grants no hyper armor, and there are seemingly other options that do what this does, but better. Ah, that's what I thought, until I noticed something in the Radahn fight. In first phase, he was rotted after a single cast, but this is expected. Phase 1 Radahn is notoriously weak to rot. But in Phase 2, his rot resist more than doubles, all the way up to 734. But again, it only takes 1 cast of Butterflies to rot him, which means it's doing well over 700 buildup. For comparison, the maximum I could get with Rotten Breath or Exeek's Decay was around 500, and that's with a full 5-second channel time. And despite Butterflies causing you to be stationary while casting, the spell will still go off, even if you're hit out of the animation, so you almost always get the full benefit of it. I should also mention that Incantations and Hefty Rot Pots apply a much stronger version of Scarlet Rot that does nearly double the damage of that applied by weapons like the Antspur or Rotten Great Axe. By this point I was already impressed with Butterflies, but once again in Phase 2 after Radahn has already been rotted, another single cast procs Rot for the 3rd time, even with Radahn's resistance exceeding 1,000. So obviously now I'm just curious, what is the limit of buildup for Rotten Butterflies? Well, aside from Melania, Placidusax has the highest rot resistance in the game at 1349 in 1806. Just to put things into perspective, the highest buildup I could get from Scarlet Aeonia, Butterfly's direct competitor, was just under 900. which is already an insane number. But it's a number that Rotten Butterflies would say is some weak shit. Even at 1349 resistance, one cast procs rot, and that's without all the butterflies connecting. Using some Disney magic to enter the center of Plassie for more optimal positioning, we can see that Rotten Butterflies can cause over 1700 rot buildup. That's the equivalent of attacking more than 25 times with the Ansbach, but in a single cast. This means that unless an enemy is immune or named Millennia/Placidusax, butterflies can rot anyone, regardless of phase and regardless of resistance profile, in one cast. It's so effective that on certain bosses like Rellana, it can trigger buffs like Exaltation and Crown before the physical damage explosion happens. Or in other words, it can even buff itself. And the cherry on top is that you get to look like this while casting it. Yeah, Rotten Butterflies like really clutched up. I kind of had this spell in like D tier, but I'm going to have to do some testing because it might be really good. It's kind of crazy. That last rot proc I was just like really shocked by. Anyway, nice. Radahn down. But first we need to unattune both Golden Arcs and Rotten Butterflies. Honestly, I didn't even really need Golden Arcs. I think 3 Rotten Butterflies was going to do it, but... Alright, discard Rotten Butterflies. And discard Golden Arcs, because that was used on Consort Radahn. Alright. And please give me your Incant. Nice! Okay, so we got all of Ansbach's stuff. Obsidian Lamina and Furious Blade of Ansbach. Awesome. Light of Mikola. 72 Faith, I didn't realize that. That's crazy. With those 2 pickups, we now have enough Incants to finish off the final few bosses, the first of which is Rellana. Here I'll be using the buffed Rain of Fire incantation, which I mentioned before is pretty good now. The damage is comparable to the best incants from the DLC, consistently hitting for about 2k or more.
Oh, that was pretty good.
But the cast time is just long enough to be annoying, and usually by the time the rain appears, whoever you've been targeting has moved out of the AoE, so that can be frustrating. It does have a fun gimmick where during the animation you can end up dodging like 80% of all attacks.
Oh, you just dodge everything while you're in the casting animation. That's crazy. No. Oh! If I didn't target her, that would have been so good, man.
I am really glad this got buffed, but overall it's still probably not a mainstay in the arsenal.
Oh? Oh! Alright. So the second phase is a little bit tricky, but you still can dodge a lot. That's pretty cool. Nice.
Once MessMUH's right-hand swordswoman falls, we can discard Rain of Fire and head through Darklight to take on Jori. I'll be using Spyra here so we can have a 6 Spyra v Spyra battle, but also because I can't risk using a better incant ahead of Midra. And yes, Spyra is another DLC stinker, but I'm really not that mad about this one because Jori gets the same bad version we do, so at least we're on an equal playing field. Spyra does get a nice boost from the Spiral Tree Seal, and is specifically stated to be the superior sorcery of the priests. And if this one's the good one, I don't want to know what the inferior one looks like. I think they could fix this by making every subsequent hit do more damage and grow like taller or wider, but currently it's not really worth using. Either way, Jori falls without too much effort, which means we can discard Spyra and make the stroll through the advance to fight the Lord of Frenzied Flame. The Furious Blade of Ansbach is a good choice here, being a Blood Flame incant, and I'm gonna be honest with you here, I can't give this an objective rating. I am completely Ansbach pilled and everything this guy uses is the best, okay? Smash. But I'll give you the highlights. It has decent bleed build-up at just under 200, it's quite quick and you can actually roll before the animation even finishes, and you can charge it to increase damage, build-up, and number of slashes. The final slash in both the charged and uncharged version is a 180-degree arc, so it can hit even the most mobile of bosses. I do think it's a bit underpowered considering you get it post-Consort Radahn, and I really wish we got a Blood Flame Seal, or at the very least Ansbach's armor should buff the damage, but yeah, you can't win them all. Midra's defeat means we can discard Furious Blade and pick up, in my opinion, the most disappointing incant in the entire game. Literally anything else would have been better. Laser Eyes, Dive Bomb, just anything. With this pickup, there is 1 boss left and 5 DLC incantations. 2 of these are healing spells, which I don't need because I never got hit a single time ever, and 2 more are just much worse versions of nearly every other spell in their class. I will say Ghost Flame Breath is actually a good incantation, it can definitely melt enemies, but it does less than half the Frostbite buildup of Dragon Ice and less damage than Glintstone Breath, so it doesn't really have a niche to fill. And it requires 3 Dragon Hearts, which we couldn't get if we wanted to. That leaves the Light of Mikola.
Oh shit. Putrescence is not gonna like that. I'll tell you what.
And I have a love-hate relationship with this incant. Visually, it slaps. It's everything I want from a god laser type incantation. I think it's one of the best looking incants in the game. But mechanically, I think they dropped the ball a little bit. For most players, this is going to be the last incantation they use in all of Elden Ring. It's after the final boss, so they're going to beat that guy, claim their prize, and go test it on some dude, realize it does less damage than like a single cast of Knight's Lightning Spear, and go, oh, well, that's cool, I guess. And then uninstall Elden Ring forever. And the last interaction they'll have had with this incredible game will have been a disappointment. And I hate that. I don't know, I just think this spell should have been iconic. Like every time you cast it, it should remind you that you just 1v2'd a god and a lord. But instead, it's just another kind of mid-tier incantation. It does work well here because it's like an orbital god laser, and Putrescence is basically just a collection of cave sludge, so it does shine in some situations. Okay, I can dodge this with this, right? Levitate. Nice. Can we do it again? Oh, we can. I mean, that's kind of cool. This should be doing like 10k damage, honestly. Like, it's good against Putrescence, even, and it's only doing 4k. I think Knight's Lightning Spear here would do like 7k, right? I don't know. It needs buffed. It's cool, but it needs buffed. 4 casts in total end up taking down Putrescence, which means we can discard the Light of Miquella and throw up the tier list for this run. And if you liked the video, consider a sub. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks, and I'll catch you in the next one.